Hi, welcome everybody. We are going to be discussing visualizing trends in college sports and admissions. And this is a combined effort on this presentation between the student athlete advisors and More College Data. First, we'd like to have you scan this QR code with your mobile phones. You'll get to a Linktree account where you'll find lots of valuable information and presentations from the past that we've done, as well as contact information for people in our group. So next, we're going to introduce ourselves. So my name is Katie Anderson. I am a co-founder together with David Steckel of the Student Athlete Advisors. And my own business is College Fit, and I'm based in Dana Point, California.
Hi, I'm Amy Bryant. I am based in Atlanta, Georgia, and my business is BryantCollegeCoaching.com. No, it's just Bryant College Coaching.
My name is Joe Slater. I am a college advisor. I was a baseball coach for a long time in California and now work as an IEC. My business is Slater Advising, and I am located in Sacramento.
Hey everybody, Reed Meyer, based in Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas. I too am an independent counselor, former college baseball player myself. I've been in the business since about 2016 and excited to be on the presentation.
Hey there, I'm Lee Moore, founder of More College Data. We keep a comprehensive and updated set of all kinds of data about colleges and universities, and athletics is a big part of it.
And hey, everybody, Brad Pochard, President Managing Director with More College Data. Lee and I are business partners. Been with More College Data for about a year after 23 years of college admissions, financial aid, enrollment background at 2 college campuses.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so let's get started. So despite how many IECs may feel about sports being such a big part of the college culture, sports and American colleges pretty much go hand in hand. So we want to use this presentation to showcase some of the true hard data points to help justify and contextualize why colleges give so much attention to athletics. Many of you will come across athletes in your practice, so certainly more than once. So some of the topics that we're going to cover today include what are some of the realities of college athletics IECs can share with families using a data-driven approach. Can athletes use their sport to get into the Ivies or other high academic institutions? And we'll also address why some colleges pay their football coaches more than their entire math department combined.
And to kind of move our way through this a little bit with how we're going to spend our time, it's important to better understand and to kind of level set a little bit about many of the things that we're going to discuss will depend on the types of institutions you might be counseling students towards, or the level of institution that you might be looking to play at. So much of what we talk about will depend on your choice set, the types of institutions that you're considering, and what those relationships look like will vary between an admissions department and an athletic coach, or how that might influence your ability to be recruited or to gain admission into these particular places. So you all know Division I, Division II, Division III, NAIA schools. And our point here is that in fact, that relationship will look different. And those experiences will look different depending on the types of institutions that you're looking at. If you're looking at a Power 5, that experience and that connection that admissions offices have with athletic divisions and operations will look different than, for example, a Division III or NAIA who might be leveraging athletics to meet enrollment goals. So just a high-level overview of much of this will depend on the types of institutions you are either directly looking at or that you're counseling students towards.
Okay. For those of you who may be new to athletics recruiting, these statistics that we are presenting here are available from the NCAA and also from a website called scholarshipstats.com. We have highlighted many of the main high school sports for the boys in this chart. The blue bar is the percent of male athletes playing each sport in college at the Division I, Division II, and Division III levels. And yellow shows a percent of male athletes playing only in Division I. So as you can see, not a single yellow bar crosses the 5% line, and most of them are in the 1 to 3% range. For high school girls, the numbers are quite similar. Again, if you want to look at these numbers more closely and especially dive into some of the niche sports that we did not present here on this slide, you can go visit ncaa.org or go to scholarshipstats.com for more information.
Another way to look at access, so we just spent some time looking at percentages of students who are able to play at the college level. Another way to consider this is by looking at it by conference. And so what we did here is gave you the draw rates for some selected conferences across the country to give you some comparison. So a draw rate is your yield divided by admit rate. It's a commonly used admissions enrollment management measure that just gives you a little bit of insight into what these conferences may be offering you as far as selectivity, academic profile, and types of places that may not be number one or kind of top of mind for your students. But for example, with the NESCAC or the UAA or the Patriot League, what these different draw rates may look like as it relates to the student experience and academic quality of those programs.
So in the next section, we're going to talk about putting the focus on the benefits of college athletics to the students and student athletes. So as I mentioned earlier, many of us work with student athletes who are trying to use athletics to get into the best schools that they can get into, or better schools than they can get into without sports. So we wanted to explore a few of the data-driven elements of the student-athlete journey from admissions through to graduation. In this section, we're going to talk about some of the common questions that we get from families, and that includes what are the minimum academic requirements for athletic recruits at high academic schools? Does this vary across institutions? Can athletes pursue challenging majors? And how do athletes compare to non-athletes when it comes to graduation rates? We already gave you some examples of a few athletic conferences that contain low acceptance rate institutions. And in Division I, that would include the Ivy League and Patriot League as some examples. And in Division III, some examples of conferences include NESCAC and the UAA. So in contrast, on the far right, you can see an example of the SEC, which is one of the Division I Power 4, used to be Power 5 conferences. This chart simply highlights the percentage of all students, not just student athletes, within each conference based on high school class rank. So if you're working with student athletes who don't quite fit the Ivy League standards, as you can see on the far left, then look into the Patriot League or the NESCAC schools to see if these, these schools might be a better high academic fit. And here's another example. So the easiest way to talk to families who insist that their student athlete is academically qualified to attend an Ivy League or other highly rejected school is to share admissions data, for example, test scores. These schools will never publish information for athletics. However, as athletics counselors with many athletes who have been recruited by these schools, we can tell you that Ivy recruits need to look very similar to the regular student body at these schools. We recognize that the scores on this slide were collected while the Ivies have been test optional in the last few years, and we expect that the test score ranges will probably shift slightly down as they return to test required over the next few admission cycles. But anecdotally, based on our experience on the low end, athletes may be able to get scores one standard deviation below the bottom of the middle 50%. We also want to point out that any application data points that are towards the bottom end of the standard usually need to be offset by athletic talent for the coach to be willing to advocate for the student athlete in admissions. So here's another perspective on the same question. So here we've summarized the GPA ranges for admitted students, not just student athletes, as reported through the common data set for the UC schools. You may be surprised to hear that coaches for varsity sports at schools in the UC system are allowed to recruit down to a 3.2 GPA with no questions asked by admissions. Between a 3.2 and a 3.0 GPA, coaches can advocate for a recruit through a committee process. And what you may find is that many public flagship schools have similar minimum GPA requirements for student athletes. So again, if you're working with a student athlete who wants to attend a high academic school, has the Division I athletic talent, but maybe has mid to low 3.0 range grades, that student might want to consider public schools like these that could be a little bit more forgiving with their recruiting GPA policies. And then once they get to campus, Division I student athletes are studying the same majors as other students. Notice that business and STEM majors are the most popular majors for student athletes. This is reported by the NCAA research. And the same holds true for Division II student athletes. Again, business and STEM being at the top of the heap. And now we're going to quickly show you the graduation rates for student athletes compared to the general student population at Division I schools. Student athletes graduate at a higher rate than the general student body across the board. And the same is also true for Division II. Most importantly, for underrepresented populations like Black, Hispanic, and Native Americans, student athletes graduate at a higher rate than non-student athletes within these groups. And although sports like football and basketball may get a bad rap for being sports with more flexible admission standards, at Division I schools, these athletes graduate at a higher rate than the general population of students. Okay, turning it over to Reed.
All righty. So in the spirit of sharing as much data as we can in the sports world, I want to talk to everybody a little bit about NIL, or name, image, and likeness, and then we're going to speak a little bit on the transfer portal as well. So just to kind of level set on what NIL is, this is the legislation that passed in July of 2021 that allows student athletes to profit off of their own personal name, image, or likeness. So this is coming from a direct athlete rather than a school itself. Obviously using the school a lot of times for some of their popularity, but it is the individual who is selling their own likeness for their own any type of financial gain. So looking at the next slide here, we're going to talk a little bit about where this is most distributed amongst the sports world. I think, we hear a lot about certain headlines and big things happening and thousands of dollars. And just to kind of let everyone know where this stuff really sits, if we take the NCAA as an example, there's a little over 500,000 kids that are competing as NCAA athletes. About 80% of those kids are outside of football and basketball as a sport, but almost 70% of the NIL market share that exists right now is in football and basketball. So it doesn't leave a lot of the rest of the pie for all of those other kids that are existing in this space. What it kind of supports the idea of is that, listen, at the end of the day, there are certain sports, certain schools that get a lot of television time, get a lot of attention, have massive boosters, and there's a weight to a lot of this. There's a weight when it comes to sports. There's a weight when it comes to specific teams and divisions, and that has to be taken into consideration as we hear about all the different headlines existing in the NIL space. Moving ahead from this slide and looking at the next one, we want to give you some data on really specific numbers as it pertains to actual individuals or actual sports. Again, just to create a little bit of context and level setting for what this looks like. So NIL in perspective, if you can see at the top here, Shedeur Sanders, Deion Sanders' son, quarterback for Colorado, at least as of the time of this recording. Olivia Dunn, a gymnast at LSU who had 1 million followers on Instagram before she ever even made it to LSU. Caitlin Clark, who revolutionized, women's basketball for a generation. Arch Manning, coming from the Manning dynasty and football and at the University of Texas right now. All of these folks have, very sizable NIL valuations from what we can tell. And the comparison I like to make in a chart like this is when all of us counselors have complaints about Yale and Dartmouth and Brown and Harvard getting all of the attention and all of the headlines and everything being based off of them, this is what we see in the NIL space. You have a very small number of kids that are taking up a huge swath and a huge percentage of what this NIL conversation really is. And that's where a lot of the headlines are. That's where a lot of the attention is. That's where a lot of the criticism is. But if we look farther down on this chart, you're going to see the average gymnastics player at the Division I level, or competitor at the Division I level, who, by the way, tend to sometimes even compete in the Olympics. They're only coming in at about $7,000 for their annual market value. An average football player is closer to $3,500, again, at just the Division I level. And then if you look at the average for all athletes across the NCAA, it's about $53, which is not really anything to write home about and certainly isn't going to help you pay tuition at the end of the year. So just to give everyone some perspective on what this looks like in the NIL space, this is what we're talking about when we hear a lot of those criticisms. Going over to the transfer portal now, I want to talk about 2x2 and 4x4. So what I mean by that is, or 2x4 is probably what I should have said there. Junior college transfer rate, so kids going from a junior college or community college up to a 4-year, and then kids going from a 4-year to a 4-year, which is what we hear a lot more about. So if we go to the next slide, you're going to see the data that we were able to pull for junior college students. So looking at the populations in junior college, you have about just over 10 million kids that are in the junior college and community college world, and about 70,000 of those kids are athletes. If we're able to pull the data of kids that are matriculating from that 2-year school to a 4-year school, if we only pull Division I and Division II kids, because that's the only data we're able to find and have, we're almost at 40% matriculation of those kids going from a 2-year to a 4-year college. Overall, in the junior college space, it's only about 16%. So we've, doubled essentially what that number is on the athlete side. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, kids they have something to sort of push for at that college level. And we really see that as a positive influence on the transfer side. So 2 to 4, just anecdotally want folks to know that if you have kids that are considering junior college, it's not the end of the world. Quite a few of them do end up going on and moving to the next thing. Looking at the 4x4 transfer, which I think has captured a lot more of people's attention recently because of the introduction of the transfer portal in 2018 and the expansion of we'll say liberties with the transfer portal as time has gone on. I think one of the big concerns that people find is that everyone's transferring all the time and they're going up and they're going down and all this kind of stuff. And if we look at the data here, on the left side, we have the Division I numbers. On the right side, we have Division II numbers. You'll see that for Division I, almost half of those kids are just football and basketball, those high NIL sports. And for Division II, it's almost 40%. So again, you have a large market share within sort of those higher NIL, higher market space areas. And on the right side, you can see at the Division I level, 81% of kids are staying within their own division. At the Division II level, 76% of kids are staying at their own division. So really what we're seeing is that kids are being leveled appropriately in most situations. Maybe they just have a scenario at that school where a coach changes, there's a culture difference. Yeah, playing time has something to do with it. Yeah, NIL may have something to do with it, but it's not the dominating factor. And to point out, at the Division I level, only 7% of athletes are transferring on a year-to-year basis, and at Division II level, only about 2.6% of kids are transferring on a year-over-year basis. So again, just want to level set on NIL and transfer portal. And now I believe I'm going to pass it over to Joe to talk about the benefits of athletics to colleges.
All right. So we looked through the benefits to the athletes, and now the question kind of becomes, why did the colleges participate in this world of athletics? And it's can be tough to justify when you start to dig into the numbers of what it takes to run these athletic departments. If you break Division I down into the FBS, which is the big football schools, the FCS, which is the smaller level, and the schools that have no football, you can see billions and billions being spent every year on athletic departments. If you go to the next slide, you'll see, in each of those divisions or in each of those types of schools within Division I, LSU, Central Connecticut, and Cal State Fullerton, you can see, for LSU, $205 million a year in expenses. Central Connecticut, 17 million, Cal State Fullerton, 23 million. So, it's obviously a big difference between 200 million and 17 or 23. But if you start to dig into the actual numbers, you can start to see why a place like LSU spends the money that it spends. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see, what are they spending their money on? Coaches' compensation, $40 million a year. Game and travel expenses, $25 million a year. Facilities, $30 million a year. These are massive, mind-blowing numbers. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see, to justify it, they're bringing in $200 million in profit. So that's coming from TV deals and conference distributions, $50 million in ticket sales, $60 million in donor contributions directly to the athletic department. So it's kind of a no-brainer for LSU. They get all the benefits of that athletics brings, all the benefits that go to the student athletes, and they're pretty much washing out when it comes to the financial side. They're making about as much money as they're spending. But if we move on to the next slide and we look at the FCS and the non-football schools, some of those, the schools that aren't bringing in $200 million like LSU, now it starts to get a little bit more questionable. You look at, at schools like Central Connecticut and Fullerton, and you can see here that almost 75% of their athletics budget is coming from school and government support or student fees, which means that the burden of having these athletics departments is falling on the schools, the states, and the students. And, what is driving these schools to continue to have these departments? This is a question that a lot of people are asking right now, and something that we want to address in this next session. So I'll pass it over to Amy to start to talk about what some of these schools are looking for. The way that we want to kind of start it is just with the idea of athletics being the front porch of the university. It's this quote here is from Dean Smith, who is a longtime coach, and I've heard it from many administrators in the space, that it's not the most visible part, or it's the most visible part of the university. Most of the interaction that the American and international public has with colleges is when they see them on Saturdays playing football, when they're watching the Olympics and hearing about where our best athletes are going to college. It's great marketing for the colleges, and as Amy will go through, it's individual performances can make a big difference.
Yeah, so when high profile sports, as Joe alluded to, when they experience unprecedented success, the impact on admissions can really be profound. And that's what we want to show you here in this next section. So Butler University, for example, you can see here we pulled some of the admission data from 2009 compared to 2010, compared to 2011 and 12. And you see that huge spike there between 2010 and 2011. So in 2007, this was the time when Butler made it to the Sweet 16 for the first time as a 5 seed. And then in 2008, they were the 7 seed in the tournament. Then in 2009, they were the 9 seed in the tournament. And then 2010, they played in that national championship game. And then boom, you see the spike in applications into admissions right after that. Let's see, University of Tennessee, similar situation here, and this is a little bit more recent. Some of you might remember the infamous goalpost game that occurred right in the fall, right around the application season, and then going into the 2023 application season is when we see that spike in applications at the University of Tennessee. Jackson State, again, talking about Deion Sanders, who may or may not continue to be in his current role, but there's no doubt of his impact prior to his time at Colorado. So here we see what we call the prime effect when he was at Jackson State. So he was hired in September of 2020, and that application season saw a little bit of a jump in applications. And then they had an okay year. His first 2 years, you'll see there's a little bit of a decline, maybe in applications. And then in the fall of 2022, they had that unbelievable year, and the application saw that unprecedented jump. Then when he gets to University of Colorado, he's hired in December of 2022, and we start seeing the prime effect occurring again there. They get ranked in 2023. They beat TCU. The diversity numbers jump up drastically in their application cycle. They had actually a 50% increase in Black applications and a 25% increase in Hispanic applications due to what we call the prime effect and the success of that football program. Then let's take a look at University of Cincinnati. The first top 10 ranking in a decade occurs in 2020, and the first college football playoff berth occurs in 2022. So you see there again the same effect, that increase in applications. And both Jackson State and Cincinnati, these are not just Power 4 and 5 schools you're seeing here. The success effect on applications can happen anywhere in a high-profile sport. I would be remiss to not include here the women's sport effect. It's very similar. And we saw this past year with the University of Iowa and Caitlin Clark, at least we're expecting to see an increase and an uptick in applications next year. Of course, Caitlin Clark played this past basketball season, and the University of Nebraska, I'm not sure if you guys are all familiar, but they had a complete sellout. They had this huge, they had the most amount of fans ever in a volleyball game. And so we're expecting that the University of Iowa and the University of Nebraska both sees the same kind of application impact there. And that's it for me. I'm going to kick it off, kick it back to Joe.
So, that's a bit of the description of, some of the admissions benefits that can come from some of this success. We want to talk quickly about some of the fundraising benefits that schools also see. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see back to LSU as our example. They brought in $60 million in donor contributions directly to the athletic department. If you look across FBS, billions of dollars are being raised by these schools, and it's coming in, to directly support athletes, to directly support their scholarships, to support the all of the expenses that the athletic departments bring up, as well as academic support and important academic functions that these departments are putting in place. And if you go to the next slide, beyond the academic side of things, there's also the benefit to the campuses for this athletic success and this athletic fundraising. The greatest example of this was Johnny Manziel at Texas A&M. After his incredible run of 2 years and Heisman trophies, Texas A&M ran a campaign and raised $740 million for the school, which was $300 million higher than they had ever raised before. And so not only is the athletic department raising money, but the math department the science, the chemistry department, the biology department, they're bringing their donors in. As we said, it was the front porch of the university. It's a place to bring donors together in person, to get them on campus, to get them re-engaged with the university after they leave. My favorite example from my time at UC Berkeley was at during the football game every Saturday. The athletic department the athletic director had a suite, and the chancellor of the university also had a suite. And the athletic director invited all of the gold medalists and the NFL players and the NBA players and all the alumni back. And the chancellor brought back Nobel Prize winners and heads of industry and CEOs. And at halftime, they would all come together in the middle and meet each other. And Nobel Prize winners would be excited to shake the hand of the running back who won the Super Bowl the year before. And there was a couple of astronauts, and it was this incredible feeling of mixing the university with the athletic department. And and that directly leads to the success of the fundraisers, both for the athletic department and on campus. So beyond fundraising, one of the other most important pieces of the puzzle for why schools are interested in athletics is, once again, as you look past those big football schools and into some of the other colleges across the nation. If you want to go on to the next slide. There's a huge benefit to colleges, that have a lot of, as Brad was talking about earlier, share in the marketplace. What is the benefit to Vanderbilt and Davidson and Columbia and Brown and some of these Ivy League schools to having athletics departments? They get a lot of grief sometimes about all the sports that they're hosting and all the students that they're letting in through the admission cycle. But there's a huge benefit that these schools get from having all of these sports. And mostly that is that all of the athletes that they're bringing in are, either, scholarship or non-scholarship athletes are applying early decision, which is giving them a guaranteed 1-to-1 acceptance yield rate. And then they are almost all full pay, so the percentage of student athletes that are coming in full ED and full pay is very high. And that is a very attractive thing to, all of these really prestigious schools to get, these numbers in the door early on so that they can really, fill out their class with the students who they're looking for. Another group of students, if you go to the next slide, who's starting to, slowly work their way out of the system is males. Men is a demographic that is declining steadily in the last decade, and there's enrollment cliffs coming in the future, and there are a lot of schools, especially smaller liberal arts colleges, Division III schools across the country, who are really worried about their gender balance on campus and how can they attract men to apply to these schools. And one way that a lot of these places have found is using athletics. Adding a football team adds 70 to 90 male enrollees every year. This is a big problem for even the haves out there, but now Brad's going to kind of talk about what the have-nots are using athletics for.
Thanks for giving me the have-nots. You get to do the haves, and I'll handle the have-nots. Appreciate that. But a lot of colleges who might have some lesser strength in the market, lower market position, are really leveraging athletics to meet their enrollment targets. And so we talked a little bit in the very beginning of, Division I, II, and III, and how coaches or athletics might be kind of leveraged through the admissions process. And Olivet is a good example of some recent success of meeting enrollment targets by increasing the percentages of athletes. And again, this data that More College data collects comes from the NCAA equity and athletics data. Percentage of athletes that are on campus is the blue of the donut chart compared to the yellow. And you can see that those high percentages. We advance, we give you a few more slides on some other colleges that are out there, and the theme remains the same as a lot of schools that are working to build enrollment around athletics continue to leverage their existing sports, and we're also seeing many small colleges out there are adding sports, where even institutional dollars and discount make it a financial gain to build enrollment, even with discounting for scholarships or need-based aid by adding sports. That head count and filling beds, if you will, is very important. And we'll finish with just a little bit more of data. If you advance to the next slide, of not that we want to always call these schools the have-nots, but it's completely on the different end of the spectrum, if you will, from, high percentages of early decision, high percentages of full pay, and very low overall admit rates that were in the quote unquote haves. These schools are in different market positions than those. And, because they have reliance on enrollment to meet budgets, they don't have higher percentages of early decision. They don't have higher percentages of full pay, thus leading to overall admit rates higher than they mostly would like. So it just shows a little bit that then these groups might be a little bit more open to working with students from, that coaches are recommending or being recruited to their particular schools through the athletic department. And there might be a little bit more of a partnership between admissions and athletics in these schools' particular case.
Yeah, so I think we've come to the end of our presentation here. One of the things that I know one of my professors used to say, and we talk about a lot amongst our group, is that people want sports to be good, they want sports to be bad, and in all reality, sports just are. They're a fabric of what we've chosen to embed in our college experience. They're a fabric of culture and society, and to better understand why they exist and why they exist in the spaces that we have them, I think is really important, especially for what we're doing. So yeah, thank you so much for spending this time with us today. If you have any questions, please use the LinkedIn or use the QR code that you can see on the screen there. Reach out to us. Always want to sort of advance the conversation here. So yeah, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you next time.